Road to Ruin is a very classic Fire Emblem hack made by Prime Fusion, featuring a mercenary leader named Vance and his party. I played this hack back in 2014 on my channel when it was somewhat new, and I recently considered getting back into it, as I heard that Prime Fusion just completed it. A completed hack is a rarity, as you might well know, as hackers tend to abandon their projects, something which annoy me to no end, so I thought I'd give this hack another go, but after playing the first map, something just felt incredibly wrong. I listened to my initial recording and I realized that I wasn't having fun with this hack at all, and this led me to not upload the first part on my channel as I intended to do yesterday. However, after thinking over it for a very long time, I decided that I should make a video about what exactly I think this hack does wrong, because I don't think it's what most people think it is. Now, before I get started, I would like to specify that this is not a video just to shit over Prime Fusion's hack or to make fun of it. I am making this video to be helpful, not to be annoying. So let's jump into exactly what makes this hack feel so odd right off the bat. A common criticism that Road of Ruin gets a lot by the community is that it's sort of bland. It doesn't feature anything super special. The main character is just a plain old mercenary and he doesn't even have a unique animation or a cool personal weapon. The story is sort of vanilla flavored and it doesn't really do much to excite you during its first few initial minutes. However, that's not really what is wrong with Road to Ruin. Now sure, it doesn't have a lot of flavor to it, but that's not a big issue on its own. Staff of Ages is very predictable in its plot, but that feels absolutely amazing to play right off the bat. Now, the first big issue with Road to Ruin is actually the first chapter's map design, and I'm going to deconstruct exactly why this map fails to capture the player's interest on multiple levels. First of all, the map itself is very simple. You're fighting generic soldiers on the grassy plains. There's a river in the middle, a bridge, 2 pathways down to the boss, with enemies regularly placed in between. At first glance, this looks to be a very nice basic map to start off your hack, but as you start playing it, something starts to feel incredibly off about the enemies you fight. At first I had difficulties recognizing it, but after playing through the entire map, it struck me. The units that you are given at the start of the map are not particularly good at tackling the enemies of this map. So let's start by taking a look at the characters that you are introduced to. Now first off, you have Vance, a regular mercenary with enough speed to double most of the enemies on this map. Now while Vance can easily dispatch the fighters, what he can't do is retaliate at range, being locked to swords, and look at the enemies placed in his paths. Soldiers wielding javelins, fighters with hand axes, archers with 2-range bows. All of these enemies will slowly chip away at Vance during enemy phase, with him being completely unable to do anything back to them. Now, Vance himself comes with a personal weapon, the Short Blade, which is basically a rapier, and it is effective against a grand total of 1 enemy cavalier, situated close to the boss. And on top of that, this cavalier is wielding a lance, meaning Vance has a weapon triangle disadvantage against him. Then you have Buck, a completely forgettable archer with no redeeming qualities. For all intents and purposes, he is basically Binding Blade's Volts. There are no flyers for him to shoot down, and he isn't fast enough to double any of the significant enemies on this map, maybe with the exception of the initial soldier, and this means that, for the most part, Buck is stuck doing chip damage, which is what we hated about archers to begin with. But that's not even the worst part. You see, there is a house all the way up in the northeastern corner of this map, which gives Buck a vulnerary when visited. This sounds like a cute little secret, but the problem with this is that it means that Buck will be stuck walking all the way up to the corner of the map, where there's basically nothing for him to do, and this takes him completely out of the fights. Now, why couldn't this house just be placed somewhere closer to the center, where Buck would actually be able to contribute? This is a classic example of a secret event which ends up being a pure detriment to the actual map itself, since it takes one of your 4 playable characters completely out of the action. Then we have Tori, a Pegasus Knight who is effective against pretty much no one. Not only does this map feature hand axe wielding fighters and several archers which completely zone her out of existence, the Myrmidons will actually double her if she has her javelin equipped, completely taking away any utility she might have in the first place. Tori just has no purpose on this map. Her flying isn't useful, there's no enemies she's really good against, she's just a complete liability. Now if I designed this map, I'd have Tori join in the next chapter instead, and in this one I would replace her with an axe user so that I have some way of tackling the javelin-wielding soldiers. And then you have Ava? I don't know how you pronounce this, I'm just gonna say Ava. She is by far one of the most interesting characters of the starting party. She is a Swordmaster Jagan, and back when I played this hack in 2014, I gave her a lot of flack, since a Swordmaster Jagan proved to be incredibly unpredictable and unreliable, seeing as she would just crit everything and therefore steal experience. However, now Ava comes with a trading sword which can't land criticals, and this is extremely helpful since it allows you to be very reliable with how much damage you're doing, so you can chip down enemies with Ava and finish them off with other units. So I'm going to give Prime Fusion a lot of props for this one. This is a very well done character, and I have really nothing negative to say about her. If it wasn't for Ava, I'd say that this map would have been a complete disaster. So by now we have established that most of your starting crew, aside from Ava, is just not very good at their job in this map. So let's take a look at how most players approach this map. Now, since Bucks needs to go to the house in the northeast, and I would imagine that most players would figure this out pretty quickly, seeing as he has initial dialogue with the woman in the house, the most logical choice is to send Ava and Bucks over the bridge to tackle the incoming fighters, whereas Vance and Tori would go south. I noticed that Gast also uploaded a part of this hack on his channel yesterday, so I went and checked out how he approached the map, and he did the exact same thing, only that he decided to send Vance south on his own. But my initial point stands that Vance will most likely go south, whereas the rest of the party will most likely go over the bridge to the east. Now, as you can see, this immediately causes a lot of problems for Vance. Going south is just not a very viable option for him, but then again, who else would you send south? I mean, maybe you'd send Ava south, but there are soldiers with javelins there, so this just doesn't seem like a very wise choice. But I think this is naturally what most players will do on their first try. However, they'll quickly find out that Vance will be stuck getting attacked from 2 range by javelin-wielding soldiers and archers, not to mention that one of the fighters have a hand axe. Again, this map is just doing a terrible job at establishing Vance's usefulness by pitching him up against enemies that he is absolutely terrible against. Now, maybe this hack does this on purpose to make it difficult, but for me it just seems like the wrong kind of difficulty. Like, your main character just gets thrown into a situation where he's not very good. Now let's contrast this with the first map of Staff of Ages. Look at both the placement, the density, and the types of enemies you go up against here, and notice how each member of your starting party are useful in one way or another. Olwen is great for defending the western flank with his high defense and hard-hitting dark magic, Sawyer is effective against the enemy mages with his Nimbus Tome, Eagle can easily deal with the sword-wielding mercenaries using his lance, and Elijah is beefy and can tank the enemy soldiers as well as the Armor Knight boss. In the first map, all of these units display their strengths and can be put to work immediately by the player. Now, contrast this with Road of Ruin's opening map, a mercenary that gets 2-ranged by javelins, a Pegasus Knight that has to be constantly held back away from enemy archers and hand axes, a completely forgettable archer that has to spend most of his time walking far away from the action, and a Swordmaster Jagan, who is really the only useful unit here, but at the same time you don't really want to give her all the kills since her growth rates are really bad. A lot of you guys might think that I'm being overly nitpicky about this map. After all, it's just the first map, but that's why it's so important to get it right. This is the first chapter of your book, the first level of your video game. This is what introduces your player to your product, and if it fails to capture their interests, you're starting off your game on a very sour note, which is never good. Again, I really want to emphasize that I'm making this video to be helpful, not to be mean. There's probably more I can say about Road to Ruin, but I think I've done enough for one video. Chances are, I probably won't be playing this hack on my channel, but I might give it another shot if updates are made to it. Either way, I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about this hack if you played it, so leave me a comment below and tell me what you think. Is it good or is it bad? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? I'd love to hear your opinions on it. I've linked the official thread in the video description, so you can go check the hack out yourself if you want to try it. Leave a like if you found this video informative, and as always, my name is Mangs, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye!